Hello gardeners, my name is Sherry Street. I am a master gardener, a master naturalist, master composter, and the executive director of Keep Waco Beautiful. But just like all of you, I'm also a backyard gardener. So today I want to talk to you about compost. Compost is so crucial to everything we do, and sometimes we forget about that. Sometimes we're thinking about the flowers and the plants and the potatoes and the carrots and tomatoes and we think about the soil and we think about the plant and we think about the water, but we completely forget about the compost. So what is compost? Compost is decomposed organic matter, plain and simple. Why do we use it? Well, there's several reasons. Three of my favorite are that it aerates the soil, which is crucial for the roots, just like worms aerate the soil. And a lot of times compost has worms. Also, it acts as a sponge inside the earth so that beneath the plant, it's holding on to water. Means you water less. It's great for your water bill. But it also means that the plant's healthier because it's maintaining water at the root level during drought times. So that's really, really important. Another thing is, because it's decaying material, it's leaching minerals and nutrients right into the soil. It's nature's fertilizer. And instead of putting chemicals into your soil, like lots of fertilizers, what this is doing is actually putting those nutrients back into the soil, the circle of life, the nutrients that the soil needs. So, compost, compost, compost. And so you ask, why not just buy my compost? And you can certainly do that. Please, at least buy your compost because it is that important. I personally like to make my own compost for a few reasons. I like the personal satisfaction it gives me. I'm a creative person and I like to create my own compost. But also, I like the whole recycling aspect of it. I like to feel that what I'm doing is keeping garbage out of the landfill. And I'm reusing it. And reusing it for something really good. And thirdly, I just like to know what goes into my compost. And if I'm creating it, I know exactly what goes into it. So those are the reasons that I like to make my compost. What I'm going to do now is tell you how to make your compost. There's two ways we're going to talk about today. And the first is vermiculture, which is worm composting. All you need is a container. It can be the size of a shoebox. It can be the size of a big tote. I use 2 big totes because it doesn't make a lot. And that's the disadvantage of worm composting as opposed to bin composting in the backyard. You can make a lot more that way. It takes longer, and it's not quite as nutrient rich as vermicomposting is. However, vermicomposting does produce a very, very rich product. It is the richest of all the ways to compost. So a little goes a long way. And you can mix it in with your outdoor compost, or you can mix it in with potting soil, any way you want to do it. The things you'll need, though, are the tote, or little, big, whatever size you want to compost. Be sure and remember you'll need fewer worms and fewer materials in a small tote. But if you have it in your desk drawer at work and you're throwing your lunch scraps in there, that's all you need is a little one. But if you have it at home like I do, you may want 2 big totes. Anyway, you need to make sure there's holes in the tote so that air is going in for the worms, but you don't want the holes too big because you don't want the worms crawling out when there are storms or raining outside, even if you have your worms inside. And I recommend that you do have them inside because they will bake even in the garage in this Texas heat. And they will die. And I know this from experience. It happened to me. But put holes in that they can't crawl out of, because when it rains, they want to crawl up. That's their natural instinct, to crawl up out of the earth when it rains so they don't drown. So you will find them on the ceiling in your laundry room. So, good size holes, but not too big. Take shredded newspaper, put it on the bottom, moisten it, spray it with water, with a little spray bottle, and put in your worms. Now, according to Worms Eat My Garbage by Mary Appleoff, which is just the Bible for worm composters, she suggests red wigglers. And red wigglers is all I have ever used. Red wigglers, she tells us, are particularly good because they thrive in captivity. Unlike the earthworms you find out in the yard, they won't live very long in captivity. But these thrive, they reproduce, and she tells us that they eat their body's weight in decomposing matter daily. So, what you want to throw in there is stuff from your kitchen. You don't want protein in there. You don't want citrus. They don't like citrus, but they'll eat banana peels, they'll eat apple cores, they'll eat cantaloupe rinds, watermelon rinds, they'll eat any old veggies you have in your refrigerator. They're just sitting there just getting ready to decay. The more decayed, the better, because they don't eat it until it starts to decay. So, when the bin gets full enough, you just take the worms out, put them in a separate place, dump out all of the compost, look for additional worms. Babies might be hiding in there or something, take them out. Then put in new shredded paper, put the worms back in, and start all over. Throughout the process, you don't need to stir it, you don't need to shake it up, you don't need to do anything to it, but just watch. If it gets too dry, spray it. If it gets too wet, add shredded newspaper. It's that simple. You'll have a beautiful, wonderful product that is so good. Bin composting. Bin composting is another thing, whole nother thing. Bin composting is in greater quantities, and it is done outside. Bin composting requires a bin, which is topless and bottomless. However, in the winter months, you may want to spread a blanket over the top to keep it warm and keep it decomposing in there. But bin composting, the bin needs to be 4 foot by 4 foot, 5 foot by 5 foot, something along that line. You don't want it too tall because you need to be able to get in there and turn the compost over with your rake or shovel or however you plan to do it. The compost itself needs to remain at least 3 foot high for it to be effectively warm. You'll put the compost in layers. The bottom layer is sticks, shredded paper, and cardboard. You'll need about 4 inches of that. The second layer is anything from your kitchen. The same things you put in the worm compost bin, that's what you put in here. No protein and no manure. Manure, we don't use manure because manure tends to attract rodents. It tends to smell. And manure, dog manure, human manure, horse manure, all of them can have parasites that are harmful to humans, and we don't want to be handling that. So let's leave that manure to the professionals who do this for a living. They bag manure-based compost all the time. It doesn't smell like manure, but it's been processed and made into proper compost. But they know how to do it and they know how to handle it. So we leave manure and protein out of the picture. Save ourselves the trouble of dealing with rats and the whole thing. So each layer should be 4 to 6 inches thick. After you get the kitchen trash in there, you want to put in clippings. Grass clippings, clippings from bushes you've trimmed, nothing too bulky, finely trimmed things, and that's the top layer. You can go out and turn it once a week, once every other week, however often you want to turn it, but in 3 to 6 months, voila, you have compost. Now, I have taken all of these facts from my own experience as well as from Rodell's Book of Composting. This is the Bible for bin composting. It is a wonderful book. If you want additional resources, you want additional information, please read up. If you are into the science of composting, it will give you the correct carbon to nitrogen ratio you should want and how to get it. And if you are into being a perfectionist, It will tell you how to measure the heat element, that it'll tell you that the core temperature for optimum decomposition should be 140 degrees, and it'll tell you where to get a thermometer that will measure that. It's a metal spike with a little, it looks almost like a compass on top, but it'll read the temperature. But composting is not something that has to be so precise. Organic matter is going to decompose, whether you turn it once a week or twice a week, whether you keep it at 140 degrees or 55 degrees, it's going to decompose. The difference is it going to decompose in 3 months, 6 months, a year? If it doesn't matter to you, you don't have to regulate that temperature. You don't have to determine how many times you turn it. It can be as easy or as difficult as you want it to be. And if you are interested in all those facts, read up and find out the optimum way to compost. If it doesn't matter to you and it's a leisurely activity, turn it once a month if you want to. But when you do turn it, you need to bring the bottom all the way to the top. And the next time, again, bottom to the top. If it starts to get wet and slimy, add more twigs, add more cardboard, add more paper. If it seems too dry, add some water. So, enjoy your gardening, enjoy your composting. If this rain ever stops and we get to get out there again. Thank you all for listening to me. Have a great evening.